reminder, our values. The reason why we do everything that we do is because we believe in the inherent value and magic of every living thing, including all of us and the rest of the human family and the natural world around us, and our connection then to each other and the world around us. And finally, daily, moment by moment, figuring out our responsibility. What is our responsibility to each other and to the world around us and to what the day holds in store? So those are the questions and the values that guide us. So I'm really honored that you would spend another Sunday afternoon, especially this day. It's Father's Day. Yes. Happy Father's Day to three officially that are in the room, 4 with my dad, who's here too. Happy Father's Day. I know this day, like many holidays, is either a really beautiful day to honor either who you are or the relationship that you have with the parent, or it can be a really hard day and a toxic day. And I just want to honor both of those feelings, maybe being present even among us in this gathering right now. And so we honor that. To Father, we've said the same thing about mothering, trying to redefine, if you will, or expand it to understand it is anyone who offers life, whether that is literally physically or emotionally, showing up in someone's life to help nurture them and guide them. And sometimes we do that to ourselves, and sometimes we have a male presence in our lives that is also that. And so we honor all of that today and all of you. So happy Father's Day. A bit of business that we wanted to cover before we get on to our spiritual practices. I have a lovely statement that we and the team have written. I and the team wanted to bring to your attention, if you haven't already heard, which most of you might have already heard, but there have been some accusations made against Christopher Huritz. Chris led the Enneagram event that we sponsored last year, January, and we were going to sponsor another event with him in the fall. That was the plan. Also, his Enneagram books are in our library. For those of you that haven't ever been with us live, whenever we do gatherings in person, we always have a full library that we have stocked up, and literally you can check out or take a book that you want to read or keep. We try to keep that wide open for people. So Chris's books have been in our library. And after several conversations this week with the team and with a community member, we feel it is important that you, our community, know and deserve an explanation of our concern pertaining to these matters. I would love, if you have not read or you need a link to any of the statements that Chris put out, or there's a community of people that put out first, I'm happy. So just text me, email me, and I'll forward that to you too. But we feel it's important that you know and deserve and understand an explanation of our concern about all of this. We 100% fully support all parties involved that need restoration and healing, and no doubt they do, and some on deeper levels than others. We also have an obligation to you, to our community, of responsibility to bring it to your attention, to continue to promote openness, honesty, and transparency that are keys to our vision here at Imaginarium. We talk about imagining a better world and intentionally making it so, and that means dealing with things as they come to. And so for now, we want you to know that we're removing these books from the library, and we're not moving forward to host this event in the future. So if you have any other questions, you are free to talk to myself or any of the leadership team. Abby, Randy, and Doug, who are also present on this call, are a part of that. JJ and my mom, JJ Peterson's also a part of that too. So if you have any questions and you want to talk to any of us directly, we are wide open and ready to do that. But I wanted you all to know that at the top of this hour. Okay. Also, now let's get into our spiritual practices. Hopefully every time we gather, these are opportunities for us to center, to remind us of those inherent values of connection, worth, magic, and responsibility, and hopefully things that you can use in your day-to-day lives too. I know many of you have mentioned bringing back 1 or 2 of these things to remind you and get you centered again. So I'm so grateful that these are part of our rituals, but also a part of your life. So our first practice is the naming practice. And this is simply, we go around the room, if you will, our screen, and take a moment to introduce or reintroduce, probably reintroduce for everybody that's on here today, who we are and where we're coming from. So a lot of us are actually in a lot of different places right now. That's the beauty of these online gatherings. So tell us who you are, where you're tuning in from, your preferred pronouns, please. And then also if there's any other label that is meaningful to you or descriptor, we would love to hear that too. So I will call you out just because that's the easiest way to do it. I'm going to go to my top left, and Nathan, you are up.
Hi, I'm Nathan Johns from Lebanon, Tennessee. He, him, his, and excited to be here on Father's Day.
Love it. Leanne, you're next. I can unmute you. Let's see, hold on. There you go.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. I'm Leanne Love. I'm here in Nashville. She, her, hers, yeah. And I think that's it. I'm glad to be here.
Lovely. Glad you're back with us. Lauren.
Hey everyone, I'm Lauren Pilney. I'm here in Nashville, and my pronouns are she and her. Good to see you all.
Lovely. Doug, you're up.
Hello, Doug Day, Franklin, Tennessee. How come mine's the only name that only has the first name on the screen? Did I do something wrong?
You can change that. I'll help you change that next time we're together.
Oh, I have to do that on my end? Oh man, that's never gonna happen.
All you.
He, him, his, Franklin, Tennessee, Doug Day, great to be here. Thank you.
Love it. Thanks, Doug. Ben Tapper.
Hey everyone, Ben Tapper here, coming from Indianapolis, Indiana. He, him, his, and I'm Black and biracial.
Thanks, Ben. Ryan and Evan.
Hi friends, I'm Ryan. And
I'm Evan. He, him, and we are in East Nashville.
I love it. I know this feels a bit redundant, but it's still good to say. I say your name, you say your name. Abby Buter.
Hey, I'm Abby Buter, she, her, and I am in Tacoma, Washington. So, love seeing everybody.
Love that you're with us. Randy.
I'm Randy Oxley, and I am in Antioch, Tennessee, over by the lake, at Percy Priest Lake, and he, him.
Love it. Glad you're here, Randy. Malia.
Hi, I'm Malia Carden, she, her, hers, and I'm in Brentwood, Tennessee.
Lovely. Thanks, Malia. Sarah, is your mic working? It's not. Is that what you're saying?
No, I did not mean to be messaging the whole group. Hello, everyone.
Oh.
I'm coming from my iPad, and so I'm not used to working on an iPad, so I was trying to figure it out, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, hello. I am Sarah. I am she, hers, and I'm getting ready to go on vacation in a cabin in Wisconsin Dells with my family. So I'm at my sister's house in Missouri. So, yeah.
So fun. Is that where all those water slides are? The Dells?
Yeah, we're not doing that, but
Okay.
we have planned accordingly around all of that to have games and safe things,
Love it. Love it. I remember doing drive-bys on the tour bus by the Dells.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, Leah.
Hi, I am Leah. I am in Franklin, Tennessee today because I'm house sitting, so it's nice to have a change of pace and a nice big house without roommates to hang out in for the week. I use she, her pronouns.
Love it. She's actually on here twice on my screen, so I don't know if you want me to ask you again what your name is. Just kidding. I love it. I'm glad you're here. She's house sitting. I love it. Okay, Megan Moss, you are up.
Hi, I'm Megan, and my pronouns are she, her.
Lovely. Glad you're with us. All right, then my crew's here. So Melissa Green in Franklin, Tennessee, she, her, hers.
Cindy Hoppus, Franklin, Tennessee, she, her.
Haven Green, Franklin, Tennessee, she, her.
Hi, Rick Hoppus from Clearwater, Florida, retired and now living in Springfield.
Yay! Like literally like just retired, like here, finally.
Yes.
Yay! Okay, welcome. Take a collective breath together. honored we're in this space together. Lauren.
Hey, everyone. So those of you that are regulars know it's one of our regular practices to make it a habit of naming the good, which we feel is especially important right now in this season that we're all sorting through together. We have a theme song that goes with that. And so I think sometimes the person that hosts just sings it, but I like it when everyone sings it in a very chaotic, uncoordinated fashion. So you could all unmute yourselves for a moment. We're going to sing it together. Check, check. Is everyone unmuted? I see y'all. Okay. So the theme song is Tell Me Something Good. And on the count of 5, 6, 7, 8, you're going to
What key are we in?
Tells the first note. Okay, ready? 5, 6, 7, 8. Tell me something good.
Nailed it.
My Tell Me Something Good every week is the chaos that is that moment. So we are going to, if you have something, you can either raise your hand or just unmute yourself, and we can just take turns naming the good that you saw either in your own world this week or in the broader world that you saw other people being a part of. But hopefully there are some good things going on. I already see Leanne and Haven, so let's start with Leanne.
Okay, so I went to my dad's for Father's Day yesterday, and I concocted this way because both my parents are very, very high risk. They have health issues and are above 80. So I wore a clear poncho backwards with like the hood and the gloves and the feet, and I got to hug my mom and my dad for the first time in like 3 months, and it was like such a touching, beautiful thing. I got to kiss my mom through the plastic, but it was still, everybody was safe, and it was just a really, really sweet moment. So.
Sweet. I love that. Haven.
So, since quarantine has been a thing, we go on air track for tumbling and stuff like that. So I have been having this like mental block on my back tucks and a lot of other things, but just because I think I hadn't done any of it in such a long time, so whenever I just got back onto it, it scared me. But yesterday I had a private in real life. We were starting to do it. It was just me and Hutch, and we hand sanitized and took temperature before. But whenever we did it, I ended up doing all the skills that I thought I couldn't do anymore, and I'm very proud of myself.
Yay! I love that. Proud of you, Haven.
It's a good day. I'll go. Last night, Malia and Doug and I and a few others went downtown Nashville to the vigil for honoring Black trans lives. And y'all, it's my first time being out and about for one, besides like grocery stores or whatever. And so it was nice to feel the energy of a very large crowd. There were, I guess, over 500, the news said today. But it was so beautiful. It was beautiful. The whole service was beautiful. See these people showing up in support. The challenge they gave was beautiful. It was a lovely night all around. And we ran into Gert Comfrey, who's our dear friend and conversation partner here at Imaginarium. And they are actually running the Neon Guard or founding the Neon Guard, which we've talked about before. It's an alternative to policing in Nashville. And they were working it. And I went up to Gert. And Gert's the sweetest human, any of you that have been around them. But I was like, Gert, now who runs Neon Guard? Because I love it. And Gert was like, I founded it. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course you did. You are a badass all around. So anyways, Gert's going to come back. Gert has so much to offer us. And she's going to come back, or they're going to come back in the future and talk all about the Neon Guard and expose us to that. Because I know a lot of us have had questions around defund the police and what else that could look like. And literally Gert and the team is on the ground showing us what it looks like. So it was just an amazing night all around.
I love that. That's amazing. Ryan.
So last night we went to the drive-in drag show, and it was like the most joyful time I think I've had since quarantine started. It was so much fun, so well organized. There was such a great crowd there. The performances were amazing. We got all kinds of pride swag, and it was a blast. It was really, really fun.
They did such a
Where-
good job with safety. It was
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
such a cool way to get
Where did they do
together,
it?
love together.
So at Studio 615 in the big like event space in the back in the parking lot. And yeah, it was just really, really cool. Really well done.
Amazing.
Is that a pride thing or is that a recurring thing?
It was a pride thing. I think last night was the last night. I don't know. I'll look it up and see. But it was, yeah, it was, I hope it wasn't, because it was a blast.
I love that. Who else? Megan.
It's my 2-year Imaginarium anniversary.
Yay! Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, and also, this isn't personal, but like I feel like I should definitely become a K-pop fan because they're doing amazing things, and it's like teen led, and I think that's amazing.
Same. Leah, did you have your hand raised? Yeah.
So I kind of said this before, but it's making me really happy. So I'm going to say it again. I am house sitting and pet sitting for friends who live in Franklin, and they have a nice large house, which is really wonderful because there's been some tension between me and my roommates, and you probably know I usually just do all these Zooms from my room, which is like kind of small, and now I have this huge big house to spread out in and pets to cuddle with. So just like a very renewing, relaxing, like I'm out on the front porch swing right now. I took a bath today. So it's just like a nice little vacation that I get to take this week. So I'm really grateful for that.
I love that. I'm happy for you that you have that. Malia, can I get another taste of that? Because those ears were too much.
He walked away. But I know.
Wow.
Yes, I mean, Atlas is just our perpetual tell me something good. 'Cause
Just,
he's a
yeah.
delight. He's so much fun to have. So
I love that. Anybody else? Chris.
Hey guys, sorry we're late. My something good today is that Christopher and his partner B have been very, 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 very careful and cautious during quarantine. And so we've seen them like in passing with masks on and no touches. They've agreed to come and have dinner with us tonight out on the back porch for Father's Day. And I'm just super, super happy to get more than 10 seconds with him today. That's going to be really, really very, very meaningful for us. So it took us like 3 restaurants to find a place that we could get food from. It's been a bit of a hairy afternoon, but very much looking forward to it. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad you can do that. Hey, Vin.
We made my dad, we made my dad, I made my dad eggs, and she made him breakfast sandwiches, and then we made dirt cake for dessert, and it's like little crushed Oreos with vanilla pudding,
oh yeah,
and cream cheese and butter, and we put gummy worms on top to make it look like a little garden.
Amazing. I love dirt cake personally. Anybody else? All right. Thanks for sharing, everybody. I'll hand it back to you, Melissa.
Actually, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah. Yeah.
Hello, everybody, again. And yesterday started the summer solstice happened. So summer is here. And if you don't know anything about the summer solstice, it's when the Earth's north pole is closest to the sun, and which makes the day the longest of the entire year, which means we have the most light as of yesterday. But also, I just was really encouraged by that because light is here, and light is here to stay for a long time. and that's exciting. But I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the land and then read a little something for you. Wherever you are, just to, if you don't know where who first inhabited the land, there's plenty of resources to look that up. That's a place of healing and beginning to heal for all of us, and the work that we should be doing always, and just recognizing our connection with creation always. But the women over at Spirit Daughter did a really excellent reflection of the summer solstice, and I just want to read a little bit of that because I think there's so much of seasons that connect to our bodies and our beings, and so to honor that and to honor what that season represents for you. So this reads, the summer solstice represents the transition from action to nourishment, which is the energy that the sun gives us during the long nights of summer. Our physical world is nurtured by the sun, and so is our continual journey from darkness to light. Summer reminds us that there is hope in the world, and that the light within each of us can spread to the far reaches of the globe and inspire others. We can nurture those around us, just as the sun nurtures us. Summer becomes a time to work on ourselves and our ability to be the light, and find meaning in our journey, even when it seems uncertain. This is the rhythm of nature. New beginnings transition into a period of uncertainty. During this time, it's easy to fall prey to anxiety and worry. Significant shifts also cause old energies to surface, and darkness can easily take over our mind. Summer is the time to develop faith in our life, squash the darkness with light, and trust that, just like the sun, we will rise each day, no matter what our paths bring us. So through honoring this day of light, we energetically set in motion a period of awakening in our own consciousness. So.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sarah. Nathan is up next, and I think he's going to fully introduce this, but I'll just tell you all, we're constantly talking about, are these practices meaningful to us, and is there something else we could be doing as a ritual, which every time we get together that would help us continue to center and focus, and this is something that is needed and necessary. So excited for Nathan to introduce it to you.
Sure, thanks, Melissa. So a couple weeks ago, I sat in on it was like an online panel session called Breaking the Cycle of Racism. It was hosted by Andre Henry, and the guest they had was Mickey Scott Bay-Jones, who I think we're mostly familiar with. Anyway, they talked about a lot of different things, and I furiously took notes throughout. But one of the things that stuck with me most was Mickey said towards the end that we needed to figure out a way to make anti-racism into a spiritual practice in our regular lives. And I thought to myself, like, I'm trying to think of how to do that in my own life. But in addition to that, I thought, well, we at Imaginarium do spiritual practices every week when we meet. And so there's got to be a way for us to create something like that in the environment in which we are, talking and meeting. And so I jotted down some thoughts, and I sent that over to Melissa, and I think she shared that with the rest of the Imaginarium team. And I believe we're even sharing that out with some Black conversation partners as well to kind of get their buy-in before we sort of formally make it a part of our practice. Is that correct, Melissa?
Oh, sorry, I'm unmuted. Yes, we're just, I'd like us to announce it officially, but
yes.
We wanted to go ahead and do it today, and we feel really good about it. And so far, the response has been great. And just for y'all's knowledge, I sent it to Robin Henderson Espinoza, Martin Espinoza, no relation, and Erica Burnett. They've all been a part of our gatherings, and they all speak in and have been speakers and continue to speak into what we do. So they've been my accountability, if you will, our accountability. So thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, sure. So, and then I guess, Melissa, did you want me to share that formally today, or okay. Sorry, I didn't. It wasn't clear to me. No worries.
I was like, we're pausing.
Yes, pausing for dramatic effect. No, so
Yes, please.
sorry.
I think you can share it with this group for sure.
Yeah, okay, very good. Just said, we as a community recognize that white supremacy and systemic racism are an insidious part of our society. Intentional or not, we recognize the harmful impact of its presence in our lives and the impact it has on Black, Indigenous, and people of color members of this community and other communities around us. We commit ourselves to an active practice of anti-racism. We commit to rooting out and addressing racism whenever and wherever we find it, starting within each of us, but extending into our communities and the greater world around us.
Good job, Hayes. All right, Hayes, you're up.
Okay, so
Thank you, Nathan.
so this is a practice to help you trust yourself and trust your body. And so you put your fingers together like this, spread out, and you go from thumb to pinky. And as you tap your fingers, you say, stop, breathe, know your worth. All together. Stop, breathe,
know your worth.
One more time.
Stop, breathe, know your worth.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks, babe. You can stay if you want. You realize that. She realizes that. Okay. I love all of that. I love doing those rituals with you. They're so meaningful. I hope they're meaningful to you, and I hope you know it's not a surface thing. It's supposed to go deep. So I hope you take it seriously too. Ryan, her work is done. Yes. So I am so honored today that we're officially sharing a story. For those of you that have been around with Imaginarium from the beginning, which so thankful, Megan, you've been here 2 years. We're really on almost our 3-year anniversary as a community. August will be the official 3-year. But from the beginning, something that we realized that this whole world is relational, and we wanted to be relational, and we wanted to put people first. It was like humanity first, not text first, not doctrines first, humanity first. And so we've covered a lot of subjects over the past almost 3 years, but also we realized in the midst of trying to cover subjects, we really just wanted to hear stories from people and how their lives, how they've lived their lives, how they grew up, how they're affected. And then we realized in just the listening and the hearing, it impacts us and it transforms us, right? But it's also by listening and hearing we get to honor the people in front of us. And so Doug and I were talking as we were driving back from the vigil last night, like, I think this should just be a beautiful sort of part of our rotation where, and I don't know the timing of it, but where we just more intentionally literally focus on all of our stories, those of us that are a part of this community, and obviously speakers that we can bring in from afar too. But I'm really honored that Ben is willing to share some of his story and us talk about sort of life right now and all that's going on. Ben and I met August 3 years ago. My first semester at grad school, the very first class on campus in Indianapolis where Ben lives, I was there, and Ben was it TA? Like, what was the proper TA? Okay. He and another gal were TA of our class. And I remember, just to give y'all a bit of context, so I had already left the church, like officially resigned from the church I was at, but also peacefully sort of was like done with institution, but making my way into a Master's of Divinity and trying to figure out how all this would work and what are these people going to be like. And I had no reference. You know, I was thankful to be a part and accepted at Christian Theological Seminary, which is Disciples of Christ based, but I just had no idea what to expect. So I got in, and the very first class, Ben is one of the TAs, and I just remember, one, that class was really meaningful. Our professor is one of the good ones. But also Ben, maybe the first half of the day, he was either introduced by our professor or he interjected, and I realized this is a part of who he is, but he kept pushing back. Like, whatever Scott had to say, either Scott said, Ben's going to be sort of our devil's advocate, and we have this great jovial relationship where he's a good pushback for me. And I was like, oh, great. I'm one of those, and I'm thankful that there's another one of those not just in this class, but in this community. And then Ben and I have become hopefully dear friends now, and excited that Ben, you have made your way into this community too, officially, not just my own relationship with you, but into Imaginarium. So we're just going to take a little bit and hear from Ben, and I'll ask you, Ben, now, are you, we want to have room for dialogue at the end if y'all have questions or commentary, or if any of this story or what we talk about brings up something in you that you can process it together. But if maybe you have questions as we maybe go through certain things early on, is it okay if they ask in real time? Is that good? Okay, yeah. Lovely. So feel free to ask questions as we go. You can raise your hand, whatever's most appropriate. But Ben, hi, friend.
Hello. Hello.
Thank you for doing this. I'm wide open with where you want to start. If you want to go way back, I know it's Father's Day. You're a new father. I know that holds a lot of meaning and complication also for you. Yeah, I'm just honored. We're honored to listen.
I'm honored to be here. Before can I just ask how my mic sounds? I'm using a different mic, and I want to make sure it's all right. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm going to go all the way back because that will help me trace why Father's Day carries all the emotions that it carries for me. So whenever I tell my story, I generally start in the fall of 1997. If you saw me in the fall of 1997, you would have seen a 9-year-old boy, so you can do the math as to how old I am. You'd have seen a 9-year-old boy who was living in a homeless shelter with his biological mom and 4 younger siblings. I was also living with my stepdad at that point, but in the fall of 97, he had gone off to Wisconsin, I think to look for housing or a job or something. He was kind of periodically in and out of our lives. But up until that point, so the first 9 or so years of my life were characterized by poverty, abuse, and neglect. So we bounced around from like roach-infested motel to roach-infested motel, just kind of constantly in and out of homeless shelters, occasionally staying with my grandparents who lived in Valparaiso, Indiana, which is a middle-class white community. We suffered a lot of physical and emotional abuse, especially at the hands of my stepdad. He had a pretty bad temper, and looking back, he may have been schizophrenic as well. And so it was a really traumatic time. And then on top of all that, my parents would leave for hours on end, sometimes maybe more than that. And I, being the oldest, would be forced to look after my younger siblings. So as you can imagine, that first decade of my life was basically hell on earth. I lived in almost constant fear, carried a lot of anxiety, and I kind of carried the weight of the world on my shoulders, before I even hit double digits. And so the trauma that I experienced that first decade has shaped who I am today, by and large. But as tragic as that first decade was, like my life did a complete 180 in December of 97. So I recall being in school. That was the first time in my life I was in school. I started 3rd grade. First time I had friends. I had a best friend named Brandon. I had a quasi-girlfriend whose name I don't remember, but she was redheaded. I remember that vividly. And I didn't have a lot of friends at school because I was kind of the dirty homeless kid. But I had a couple, and life felt normal-ish. Like looking back, it was the first time that life felt close to how I imagined life feels for a lot of kids. And so I had some stability. Even though I was living in a homeless shelter, it felt different. It was the first time I had ever gone to church, first time I'd ever encountered God. I remember sitting in a gymnasium that was converted into like for a church service every Sunday. And we were sitting in the kids' service, and the pastor called the kids up onto the stage to say the Lord's Prayer with them and to like confess their sins and accept Jesus as their Savior and all that wonderful problematic theology. And I was sitting in the back of the gymnasium, and all these kids started kind of standing up and slowly making their way up to the stage. And I had done this the week before, and I went on stage, did the whole song and dance, and nothing happened. So I wasn't about to do the same thing the next week. So I sat there and watched them. And I think a couple of my siblings actually made it onto the stage as well. And as they got onto the stage, the pastor turns and looks back out of the crowd. And he says, now, just because you're not on stage, that doesn't mean you can't say the prayer with us. So, feel free to say it with us. And so as he's saying the prayer, going through the motions, I'm repeating after him. And then he gets to the end where you ask Jesus to come into your heart. And I said the words, and to my surprise, as I said them, I felt like something literally entered my chest. And I sat there kind of like blown away. Again, I'd said the same prayer the week before, nothing had happened. And for whatever reason, I felt something physical in that moment. And so that was my first like vivid memory of any sort of encounter with the divine. And that has stuck with me. But shortly after that, a few weeks later, my stepdad comes back into the picture and he wants to take us from the homeless shelter back to Wisconsin with him. And I was praying and hoping that my mom would finally tell him no, but she didn't, as you can expect in any sort of abusive relationship. So I prepared for the worst. I was kind of like just girding myself up to step back into the chaos of life that I had known. But I get called into the kitchen of the homeless shelter the next day. And as I'm walking into the kitchen, my stomach is slowly filling with dread. I'm bracing myself for something, but I don't know what. I just sense like some shit's about to go down. My mom comes in and she looks at me and she starts talking. She says, Ben, I have to go away for a while. We're going to leave you here, but don't worry. I'm going to get an attorney and I'll come back and get you. And she bent down, gave me a hug and kissed me, said she loved me, and then slowly turned and walked out the door and out of my life. It'd be like a decade before I saw her again. And that may be the lowest moment or one of the lowest moments in my life. And in many ways, I'm still recovering from that loss and that trauma. But that was also the moment my life was saved. Because after that, we went into foster care. And there were eventually 4 of us moved up to a home in Northwest Indiana in Hobart. My youngest brother, William, who had hella health complications, went with another foster family because the mom was a nurse. But we were taken by this foster family, 4 out of the 5 of us. And it was a middle-class white family, evangelical Christian family. Stayed there for 2 years. Then eventually they adopted us. And so we suddenly had loving parents when we hadn't before. We suddenly had a community where we're in school. We had a church community that came behind us and acted as a second family. And once we had any sort of stability, at least my life began to kind of flourish. I went from getting held back in 2nd grade to the next year being accepted into an honors program. And I was in honors ever since. I started making friends. I started taking on leadership roles. I took on my first job when I was 15, spent 4 years working at Arby's. So if you'd like to know any of the secrets of the Arby's franchise, I'm your guy. It's definitely not roast beef. I assure you of that. I digress. So my life was really changed once my mom left. And so I'll fast forward some. I get through middle school, high school. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go to college. I dreamed my whole life of going to Notre Dame. And I didn't just arbitrarily pick Notre Dame. When I was living in the homeless shelter, a group of students from Notre Dame were tutoring us. And so you can imagine this like 9-year-old homeless boy who stepped onto the campus of Notre Dame to go to some of the basketball games and football games. It was like experiencing a world I didn't know was possible. And so ever since those moments, I like had it in my mind that was, if I could just get to Notre Dame, that would be making it, right? That would mean that I had like overcome. And so I worked my ass off to get to that point. And I got to my senior year, I got accepted to like 6 or 7 schools, one of them being Notre Dame. But I felt like at the time God wanted me to go to this small liberal arts Christian school called Manchester College in Northeast Indiana, which I don't expect any of you to have heard of because I hadn't even heard of it before I applied. Middle of nowhere, like 1,000 students, not known for anything. But that's where I went. And in going there, I found a lot of freedom I'd never had before. I found lifelong friends, but I also began what would be the first of many revolutions in my life because I began to deconstruct my faith system and deconstruct my racial identity. I'd grown up biracial. I knew that, there was racism in the world, but I didn't identify heavily as Black. I was, to be honest, afraid of Black folks. My adoptive parents, looking back, have hella problematic ideology at times and some prejudice, and so I inherited some of that. Not to mention the only Black man I'd ever been around consistently was my abusive stepfather, and so I had a lot of like internal baggage about being around Black men. But I got involved with the International Association, so I was suddenly around students from all over the world, taking classes in political science. And it was during those 4 years that I began to deconstruct and tear down my faith, my evangelical faith. I began to deconstruct my racial identity. And that has kind of launched me into the adult that I've become. And it's been hard. It's been difficult. I got to the point where I was just agnostic. And then, kind of like Melissa, I felt the call to go to seminary. Couldn't explain why I was going. Didn't have any particular belief in God. So it made no logical sense to go to seminary. Yet there I was. And coming out of that, I walked away with a faith that was very different than what I'd ever had before, a faith that is much more mystical, much more rooted in justice, but also much more affirming to who I feel like I am today. And so now as I sit here going through another phase of revolution, as I've mentioned, going through a divorce, really trying to live into what it means to name myself as both Black and biracial, a year and a half removed from the death of my adoptive father with a multiracial son of my own. This Father's Day is one that causes me to reflect on the biological father that I never really knew, that I've seen in person once since I was 2, to reflect on the abusive stepdad that died when I was 21, so I never got to confront, to reflect upon the man who I refer to as dad, who literally saved my life but is no longer here. So I find myself fatherless, and there's a lot of grief in that. And yet I have this beautiful soul of a boy in my home who's 6 months old, and I'm now his father. And so it falls to me to hold space for him, to help him to understand how to hold his masculinity with grace, how to create space for others, and to give him the tools to figure out how he's going to identify as a person, as a man, if he chooses to be a man. And so there's a lot of responsibility with that. There's a lot of joy that comes with that. And so today I find myself looking back at my life, on the multiple lives it feels like I've lived, and just holding the weight of it all, knowing that there are many more lives ahead of me. Yeah, that feels like a good place to pause.
I'm taking notes over here. Thank you, Ben. First of all, thank you thus far, what you have shared. And we said a phrase a couple of weeks ago when individuals were sharing sort of glimpses of what they're learning in the midst of COVID. And it was a glimpse of your story. Grateful are we. We may want to say this multiple times in this hour together, but I feel like we should unmute and say that right now to honor Ben. Again, it's a glimpse of your story. Grateful are we. Ready? A glimpse of your story.
Grateful are we.
A couple things that I'd like to go back to, Ben, if you will. I'm interested, especially knowing where you and I are now. We've had multiple conversations about the divine. But when you first mentioned that encounter you had, right, in the church, I'm interested if you could tap into a little bit more about what you can remember that felt like, and maybe also, was there a presence of love, anything powerful about love or understanding who you were at that moment? And if not that moment, when did that come? Like, when did you begin to understand, like, what we call magic, this inherent magic and worth? When did you begin to understand that, and who helped you understand?
Thank you for those questions. Great questions. In that moment, I recall, outside of the physical sensation of something entering my chest, I recall feeling like an intense warmth. And it was as if, for the first time in my life, I felt like God had, or whatever was out there, had heard me and responded. And it kind of blew my mind that could be possible. But as I've reflected on it, and I look back at other experiences I've had in my life, I think that was the first time in my life that I'm aware that the divine was meeting me before I knew I needed to be met. So again, that was at most a month or two before my world would hit rock bottom and be flipped upside down. And it was as if the divine was showing up and saying, "Hey, you don't know you need me to yet, but I got you." And I look at it as one bookend. There's another bookend that happened literally the last semester I was in seminary. I was sitting in a hotel bar with a couple other seminary friends, and we just finished a class. I think it was the theology and ethics of Dr. Martin Luther King, actually. So it was a Friday evening, and so I was sitting in the bar, and my friend Carrie was talking about her journey. And as she's talking, I got this intense feeling or sensation that I was of someone that I had known before I was even alive, and that I would continue to know after I was alive. It was as if I was in the presence of a being that existed outside of the space-time continuum. And I had no idea what to make of it because I'd never felt anything like it before. And I also got a deep sense of, like, very specifically, like a maternal love, biologically maternal love, which is really weird. And as I processed it with those friends there, it was like another moment that shifted how I understood my faith, how I understood what was possible. It was as if the divine again was saying that there's more that is true than what you can see. And so it was an opening. But that occurred 2, maybe 3 weeks before my adoptive father died. And so again, it was this moment where the divine was like stepping in boldly in a way that I didn't expect, to make its presence known, to say, hey, like, we're shifting things for you before you need them to be shifted, just so that when this shit hits the fan, you're going to be ready. And so, like, those are 2 bookends that characterize how my experience with the divine has been throughout my life. It's been characterized by love. It's been characterized by surprising presence in moments. Originally I understood that through the lens of evangelical Christianity. And then as I began to unpack that, I wasn't sure what to do with those experiences. But as long as I've been willing to kind of take the brave steps of asking the questions, holding the discomfort, the divine has always shown up to help me provide just enough meaning to get me through. And so that's what I continue to hold on to.
I love that. I resonate with so much of that. I think it's interesting, that choice of words, that when you felt that presence, you felt that idea, I got you, because when you and I were in the that specific class that you just mentioned, the theological ethics of Dr. Martin Luther King, which I feel like there's a lot I would like to discuss with you on that. But I remember a moment in that class towards the end of the week where you were articulating something specifically to the white people in the room that you long to see when you walk past us, whether it's in the hallway or where, this look that literally would respond back to you saying, I got you. Like, I see this thing and I got you. And so that, I think that's meaningful, that is what you felt originally, and that's what you keep looking for.
Yeah, I don't remember saying that, but it's something that I continuously feel. And it's a hard thing to articulate. But as a person of color, you generally know who's down and who's not. And so I find myself entering spaces, even entering Imaginarium, and just being quiet and paying attention. You all probably weren't surprised that I've been quiet. Melissa, who's had experiences with me in other settings, I imagine was surprised on a silence she received, because I'm generally not the quiet person in the room. But it's a lot of that is just kind of observing what's the energy like, where's the safety, are these folks down, are they aware enough to know what it means to be down? And so and honestly, I think a lot of it goes back to that childhood, like not feeling like someone had my back as a kid, feeling like I had to be the parent, I had to be the protector. Feeling like people have my back is extraordinarily important, whether you're talking about my faith, my racial identity, my family. And I think it's probably always going to be important. Sometimes it means I expect too much out of people, if I'm being honest. And so I've got to check that. But yeah, I'm not surprised that it kind of comes up in various aspects of my life.
Yeah. I want to come back to that class in a minute, but another thing I wrote down that I resonated with, and I think many on this Zoom call would too, this idea like you've had multiple lives thus far. Gosh, I mean, for most of us, I think we grow up thinking like, this is who we are and we know who we are, and then this is who we'll be, and here's life's trajectory for us. And for many of us, that has shifted and turned over multiple times. And at first that was like a fearful thing that so many things would be changing. And as I continue to grow older, and what I hear with you is like, that's actually a beautiful thing to recognize, the expansion and the growth and the deep change that can happen internally with us, but also obviously we believe needs to happen in the world. So I wonder if you want to say anything else about that.
Yeah, I mean, I affirm all that. It is terrifying and it is wonderful. It is it is both and for me, the expansion and each new life is I have a new capacity to imagine what's possible. So as I think about, the first life, which was like 0 to 9, I didn't know it was possible to feel safe. I didn't know it was possible to have friends, to experience consistent love. And then all of a sudden, my mom leaves. I'm in foster care. And as terrible as that was, as much death was there, it was a new situation. And I was able to add space to expand and imagine something else that was possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next decade, the next transition took place in my early 20s when I'm questioning my faith, tearing down this belief system that had gotten me through like such a time of healing and going through all the fear and trauma that came with tearing that down. But as I tore it down and like brick by brick found new ways to build up something different, it was again a reimagining, a more inclusive, a more expansive faith. And so every time I've come to the edge of one life and chosen to step over that line, after the terror passes, I am confronted with an expansiveness that gives me the possibility to imagine and the hope to imagine. And what is life and justice without hope, or the hope to imagine,
I'm so glad you brought up hope, because that's what I want to go back to.
Look at that.
So y'all, we did this class, and many of you that were part of Imaginarium 2 years ago, I came back and shared many of the things I learned in this class, but it was called the Theological Ethics or Social Ethics of Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a week intensive, so that was 5 days, 9 to 5, if you will, and lots of reading, pre, in the midst, post, It was one of my favorite, is that the right word I want to use? It was one of the most impactful classes that, my favorite experiences at CTS in those 3 years. But I think it was a wonderful thing to literally be saturated in the context of the Black church, in the context from which MLK grew up, and then reading his speeches, we watched video and audio and read like every night, multiple. I mean, I feel like we read almost everything he wrote over the span of that week, but sort of to watch his life, like we literally followed it from the beginning of the Black church through his life, through his death, and then also with Malcolm X, and then a little bit post all of that. And so, as you can imagine, just the highs and lows of anyone, like I was pretty familiar. I've prided myself on being pretty familiar with Dr. King and his speeches, but man, to understand the depth and to feel more so the fuller context. And I remember how we ended that week. So many of us, hopefully all of us in that class, were sort of asking the question, so where does hope lie? Because you watched this amazing presence of a human be so impactful and have so much to say and be assassinated. And then you watch the same thing in short form as we followed Malcolm X's life. So much to say on a different end of the spectrum sometimes, but so impactful, speaking to the same problems, right? But was assassinated. And so we were sort of left with, and I remember that was the most pressing question for me. So where is hope? Because both these people and what they're representing are being killed. So I wonder if you have any thoughts on that specifically, or carrying that to today, Ben, how you're carrying hope, which I know we talked about a little bit on the podcast too.
Yeah, as you probably remember, I have had a complicated relationship with hope. I think at that point in that class, I really didn't like the word hope because it's like white wallpaper. I mean, it's just so bland and unuseful. A lot of times when we hear about hope in our contemporary culture, especially in the Christian tradition, I think it's this kind of happy, optimistic, wish for the best type thing. There's no teeth to it. But what does it mean to be part of a marginalized community, to face death, to face subjugation, to feel like your options are stripped from you, and to have hope? What then is hope if you know that change may literally be impossible? And I don't know that I have a great answer, but as I reflect on the season that I'm going through, processing racial unrest, pandemic, divorce, family issues, I've wondered, like, personally, what is this strange thing I'm feeling in my gut, right? And it's a deep peace, and a reminder that I can imagine something better, that if I continue to take the right steps, that I'm stepping towards some form of liberation. What that liberation is, I don't know. All I can do is take the step that's in front of me. And so I think that's what I would offer us to hold in the movement. Like, we have no guarantees that the world we want to exist will ever exist. Certainly probably won't within our lifetime. We have no guarantees that any individual action we take will be successful. But in centering ourselves on individual liberation and familial liberation and communal liberation, and then taking, like, just the next right step in front of us, I think we can have this conviction, or at least I have this conviction deep in my person, that I'm doing the right thing. And if I'm doing the right thing, then I can hope or believe that some sort of transformation is at least possible. When you plant a seed in the ground, you don't know what will happen to that seed. You honestly can't control if it will sprout or not. And if it sprouts, how long it will survive. Your job is then to plant and maybe to water, and then you got to let go. And so I think that's the same tactic we have to take with movement work, with justice, and with hope. It's that seed that lies deep within the darkness within us that you can only know when you are engulfed in complete darkness. And if you can get to that place where everything is nighttime, against all odds, you feel the warmth, you feel the light, you feel the intensity and that conviction that you are in the right place, moving in the right direction. And that intensity, that conviction that comes in the midst of pure and utter darkness, whatever that is, I think that is hope, or at least the beginning of it. And that's what keeps me going.
So good. So good. Okay, y'all, I would love to open it up. If anybody has specific comments or questions, or anything Ben has shared. I mean, there's so much beauty that he's shared, and hardship, honestly, that is moving and hopefully transformative for us to hear and to hold space with him. So anybody, what you thinking? What you feeling?
I just really appreciate the courage that it takes to share your story and be vulnerable. Like, I think that we live in a world that's not often acceptable, but I think that really, to be a true human being, that that's how we grow and expand and learn and love. And I think that it takes a hell of a lot of strength and guts to do that. And I just appreciate you being authentic and sharing your story. And I actually, like, I'm a note taker, and I've got, like, I started out taking a couple of notes, and then now I've got like 7 Post-it notes all over my desk, because I just need more time to think about it, because I know I have things that I want to say, but I feel very inspired about what you shared. I think it's very, obviously I'm not biracial, but I feel like, we've all walked through traumas of different types, and I can relate and experience that piece. And I think that a lot of us have had difficulty with hope and knowing what that looks like, or how to be with that. And I think that you phrase that in a really beautiful way. But I would like to maybe reach out to you later after I have some time to kind of digest. So thank you for sharing your story. It was very meaningful to me.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I'm open. Reach out whenever.
Yeah, great.
Love it. Thanks, Leanne. Anybody else? Chris Hauser.
Ben, you're welcome to plead the fifth if you want, but I'd be very interested to hear the journey your mom took for 10 years, from walking out of that homeless shelter to then you seeing her. If you'd rather not, I totally get it, but
I can share what I have pieced together. So I mentioned that when she walked out, I wouldn't see her for another 10 years. So the next time I saw my mom was when her father, my grandfather, died. I was a sophomore in high school. So maybe it wasn't quite 10 years, but I was probably 17. And she randomly showed up. No one told me that she was going to be at the viewing, but she was. And so you can imagine my shock and the horror that I experienced when all of a sudden I saw her. she looked a lot different, but I saw her. So I had to do some processing. And the next day after the funeral, she came up to my siblings and I and kind of spoke to us for a minute. We shook her hand and then left. And then I really thought she was out of my life for good. But summer after my freshman year, I get a Facebook request from her. Do you have any idea how messed up it is to get a Facebook request from your biological mom that you don't expect to ever see or hear from again? Like, oh my God, it literally wrecked my world. To make matters worse, shortly after that, her mom, my grandma, who'd been in a relationship with us the entire time, told us that she felt guilty coming to visit us, her grandchildren, without her daughter there. And that if we wanted to continue to have a relationship with her, we had to be willing to see our biological mom. So that naturally created a big rift and tore apart the family that we'd had. I decided to make the choice to see her. And again, it was another, like, it wrecked me. But I knew it was what I needed to do to continue my healing. So from what I understand, I don't exactly know what happened, but I think she and my dad moved back up to Madison, Wisconsin, or my stepdad moved to Madison, Wisconsin. He died somewhere around 2009, maybe from a stroke. After that, she moved back in with her mom, my grandma. During the time, I think one of the reasons she was gone as long as she was because my grandma and other family members may have encouraged her to stay away because we were doing so well. So she may not have been gone entirely by choice the entire time. I think there was some encouragement from family to like give us our distance. And eventually she just lost her parental rights. So then she enters back into my life, into the family's life in 2009. We've got to figure out what to do with that. She starts dating again, maybe 2015, gets married again, and is now, I think, living in Valpo, either Valpo or San Antonio. I've heard both. I have her number. We text periodically, like twice a year maybe, but there's not much relationship there. I reached out to her maybe 5 or 6 years ago to say, hey, I keep hearing this refrain that I don't know the whole story. So I want to give you a chance to tell me your side of the story. And I got a letter back saying basically, that she didn't want to bring up the past. She just wanted to let it be in the past and to keep moving forward. And that's not good enough for me, at least not good enough to really establish any sort of trust. So she and I don't talk. She has no relationship with my siblings, really, except one of my sisters. They're kind of on again, off again. And she's married and living somewhere seemingly happy and as healthy as she can be.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question on the piggyback of some of that. I forget who I was talking to, probably my husband Ben earlier this week, but talking about how institutions, they so often fail us. And when they do, we walk away from them. But family is an institution that we can't quite get away from if we want to, right? And I'm thinking about your life, Ben, and all you just shared, and also that now you have a family. I mean, you're a father. And so I'm interested if you have, I know you're living into it, you're embodying it, no doubt. But have you started to reframe what that institution will look like for you and your son even, and what you want it to look like? Maybe that's a better question. What do you want it to look like?
Yeah, there are a couple components to that. The first is, I've been wrestling with family members that I don't think are, and actually not just family, people that I don't think are serving my life or adding to it or that feel toxic. To what extent am I willing to actually sever those ties? I've been hesitant to do that for a variety of reasons, but now that I have a son, I want to protect him as well. And so I find myself trying to figure out how to balance giving him the chance to have relationships with folks that maybe they can be healthy with him in ways they weren't with me. I don't want to assume they can't. But at the same time, protecting him based upon the 30 years of evidence that I have. And so I haven't yet figured that out, but it's a tension I continue to hold. The pandemic has given me kind of a break in that I can just not visit family because coronavirus. So, once that lifts, I'll have to more seriously be engaged and think about what that means. But I've really been trying to imagine family in terms of race. Kimani right now is white passing. And so he may darken some as he ages, but I think he'll always be pretty light skinned. At best, I think he'll look like Steph Curry, for those of you that know what Steph Curry looks like. and so, but I want him to have a firm grasp of his Black ancestry in ways that I didn't growing up. But like 3/4 of his family is white. I'm not in touch with my Black family or hardly at all. And so because of that, it's not like I can take him to his auntie's house, and just have him chill and have a cookout. I've got to surround myself with Black folks in my community to make sure that he's around their kids, other biracial folks. And I have to be really, really intentional in ways that I think a lot of other people probably don't, or even in ways that his mom doesn't when she thinks of her family. And so, yeah, for me, it's trying to figure out what's the balance? How do I ensure that he's not only getting messages from his white family, but that his Blackness is affirmed so that he has the tools to live into whatever his own racial identity will be. I don't want it to just default to white because he has white family and he can pass for white, So yeah, I've been doing some thinking about what that means and how to not also put my own baggage of racial identity on him, recognizing that my knowledge will only go so far. He's going to have a completely different experience of his racial identity because of his genetic makeup and his skin tone than even I do. So I can give him some basic frameworks, but I've got to give him the space when he's old enough to kind of process for himself, and to hopefully I can be a supportive presence to help him figure out what that's going to mean. We may be 10 to 15 years out from that, but I've been thinking about that a lot, to be honest.
That's great. That's a good challenge across the board for parents to give what we can, but also allow for space, which many of us were not given that on all these different levels. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or commentary or thoughts that are coming up in light of all of this story that we're getting to hear? Nathan, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really appreciate the elements of, mystical relationship with the divine that are still a part of your story. So I mean, have had some of those similar type experiences in the, when I was actively part of the evangelical church, not necessarily as much anymore, but still that's a part of my story that I'm not really willing to let go of as of yet. And so I just really appreciate that you're integrating that in. And I'm just curious, what kinds of ways are you sort of processing that today as you've finished your theological study and as you're sort of reflecting back on that? How do you, are you still sort of embracing the mystical or what's going on there?
Yeah. I smile because I have a very strong propensity to overthink. It's the curse of being quick-witted. You think all the time, and then anxiety doesn't help. But so I'm at a point where I'm just letting it be. When I have something life-changing happen, I want it to be the norm, and I think I'm just now old enough to know that it doesn't have to be the case. It can be what it was, and then I can just kind of integrate it and then be open to however else it might manifest. And so I hold it and let it be what it is, even if I can't always name what it was or what it has been. I don't feel like I have to put too much story behind it, except to say kind of what I felt on the time. So thinking about the most recent mystical experience, like I shared, I felt like it was the divine telling me that there was more truth than what I could see, which was a message I deeply needed to hear as someone who wants to think his way through every problem in life. And a call to integrate more of myself into my faith, right? I have relied on my mind as a way to protect myself. I spent 20 years of my life suppressing my emotions because I thought they were dangerous and unhealthy. And so I'm realizing that to live into my spirituality, whatever that will look like, I have to integrate all of my being, and I have to be willing to go into the darkness of myself. So there are weeks where I feel like I do anything remotely spiritual, where I don't meditate, where I don't pray. But then someone comes along and says something or asks a question or challenges me, and I tap right back in, and it feels so fulfilling, like I've never left. And so I'm just giving myself a lot of grace and a lot of space to walk through life, trusting that as I need to know something, I'll know it. That as I need to figure something out, I will figure it out in the right time, but not putting too much pressure on myself to have any particular answers. I know that my spirituality is rooted in justice. I know it's rooted in openness and expansive love. And I know that when I call on the divine, she hears me, whether it be through a mystical experience or communication through those I'm in a relationship with. the divine communicates, and that's enough. The rest I just kind of am trying to take as it comes, knowing that when I need to be corrected or shown something deeper, I'll have it, and then I'll adjust accordingly.
As I'm hearing that, I love, you said earlier, it was a surprising presence that sort of kept coming back. And I even with what you're just saying, I think that idea to be open, and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said to be surprised by wonder. And I think wonder's all around us and literally like at our fingertips, on our taste buds. I mean, it's here and available to us. And so often when we experience those moments, we want to sit down, as you just said, and probably all of us are guilty of like, let's categorize it, let's define it, let's name it, let's own it. And that's where the problem is. Like, let's let go of that. Let's just keep being surprised by wonder and appreciating it, and then looking for it again. I love that, Ben. Anybody else? So Ben, sorry, you just muted yourself, but I have one more. Just how can, I know a few people want to get a hold of you. Is there a best way to communicate with you if they have more questions? And tell us about the podcast, please.
Yes. Thank you. So yeah, you can get a hold of me on any social media platform. If you try Snapchat, it'll be like 2 weeks before I see it. So I recommend Instagram or Facebook first. You can also email me. My emails are bjtapper, TAPPER, @gmail.com, or benjaminjtapper@gmail.com. I also have an organization called the Kindred Collective, which is a company I co-founded with 2 other people of color, designed to give voice to equity through racial equity consulting and healing dialogue work. So if you're interested in checking that out, we have a website and it's on Facebook. But the podcast. So the podcast is called Invisible Truths, and it is all about storytelling. I think part of my work on earth is to tell stories, to tell my own, yes, but to hold space to help others tell theirs, because I believe that in everyone's story, there's an inherent power and wisdom. And if you can just hold space long enough, people can tap into it. And so that's what this podcast, it's a way for me to do that, to help hold space for other people, to hear their own stories, to process and to tap into the power and wisdom that is there. Because I believe once we do that, other people will be blessed as well. And so that's what I do. I've got guests on every week. This season, I've focused particularly on women and women of color. And so you'll see a lot of birth workers, a lot of doulas, some activists. Melissa's on there as well. Her episode will be dropping in a few weeks. And we just explore the depths of people's stories. Sometimes it means we talk about their childhood. Sometimes it means we talk about their religious journey, their racial identity, parenting. We just kind of go in wherever people will let me go. And then I intersperse kind of pieces of my story that resonate for connectivity. And so the podcast was birthed out of a blog that I have by the same title. And the blog was primarily me unpacking my story and sharing what I've learned for others. And then the podcast is just an expansion of that work, because story drives everything from family to politics to religion. Everything is built on narrative. And so if we can see our narrative clearly and unpack the beauty and the wisdom, even in the midst of the pain that's there, then we can tap into our own power. And we can also see the threads of humanity that connect our stories and our narratives with the narratives of other people. And once we can see the connectivity, we can kind of understand that there's this broad tapestry of divine creation that connects us all. And once we can begin to understand that, then we're going to make much more holistic and healing decisions for ourselves, our families, and for creation. And so I think my podcast is a piece of my contribution to that work of healing storytelling.
So good. If we were in person, everybody would give you a rousing standing ovation. So I'm going to clap for you now, and you can't hear them, but I promise you. Yes. Just thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm echoing. Thank you for who you are. And thank you for being a part of this community, and thank you for honoring us with a glimpse of your story this afternoon. It has been powerful and transformative. And we'll be sure to send out links to all of those things he just mentioned too. All right, y'all, just a few announcements. Also grab your drink. If you don't have one, we're going to end with our toast. Andre Henry is with us next week. Andre is an artist and an activist and speaker. We're so excited to be hosting him. He's going to be sharing at least 3 songs. He's incredible and has so much to share and say. It will be another transformative week. We will be doing a registration for this one because Andre has such a large platform, and because we had problems with trolls early on, we just wanted to get it as safe as we could. So that link will come out in the email in the morning, and we'll post it on all the social media moving forward this week multiple times. But please join us for that. Same time, we'll do all the normal gathering stuff, and just excited to also host him. A few of us, Malia, Leah, myself, Linda, Ryan, I think that's everybody on this thread. Oh, Leah, there's not a limit to the number of people. No, that we should be good. But those that I just named, we have participated. I hope you don't mind that I just named you, so forgive me for not asking. But I've already done it. Great. Sorry. We participated in a 7-day anti-racist challenge through Chiquita Patterson, who runs United Street Tours out of Nashville. I'm trying to actually get Chiquita to come speak at a gathering, and hopefully that's going to work out soon to tell us more about her work. But this 7-day challenge was amazing. It's all driven through a Facebook group. It's you learn a lot, you talk a lot, you write a lot, you get called out and in a lot, and it's all good. Oh, Malia just posted it. It's been so good. So I encourage y'all to take this challenge. I'll post about it. Malia posted it in the chat right now. We'll also post about it on the community page. But I think for every one of us that have done it, and there's been more imaginary people too, I think every one of us would turn around to each of you saying, hey, this will be worth your time to take time out and do this for 7 days. Again, you learn a lot, you're challenged a lot, and it's needed. So I'm thankful for our growth. She's doing another challenge. I can't read it as I'm writing. In August. Great. I knew it was coming up. So we'll have time to sign up for it. And then hopefully between now and then we could get her on. But if not, between now and then after that too, it's on the docket as well as with Gert. So I wanted to tell you about that. You mentioned the podcast. That was in my notes. Okay, that's it. Let's do our toast, lovely people. So this is from, we talked a lot about change and being open to change. This is from Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, which I've mentioned, and it's on our resource page, and it's just incredible fiction, but also wisdom literature. Like, don't hear fiction and think it's not going to make an impression upon you, because it will. But this is something she writes in this. The child in each of us knows paradise. Paradise is home. Home as it was, or home as it should have been. Paradise is one's own place, one's own people, one's own world, knowing and known, perhaps even loving and loved. Yet every child is cast from paradise into growth and new community, into vast and ongoing change. I'm thankful for those words, and I'm thankful that you and I are finding each and every day with each and every gathering, and hopefully in our own work, what home is and how we can replicate that for the world. Cheers, my friends. Thanks for being with us. Thank you, Ben, again. Thank you, everyone. We hope to see you next week. Have an amazing week. Stay in love, stay with action. Bye.
Bye.